Thank you, and welcome to this last session and the most interesting session. Of course, we have had 2 days of very interactive and very interesting sessions where we actually learned about very scary things. Then we also learned about not so scary things, and then we also learned about some very rosy things. So in other words, we actually looked at what are the possibilities, what are the threats, what are the attacks which are possible. We looked at how people are actually implementing it worldwide, and we also looked at how we can actually do this in terms of infrastructure, in terms of algorithms, in terms of programs, in terms of support, and in terms of logistics. Over these 2 days, we actually had very interesting audience coming from academics, R&D organizations, uh, coming from industry, coming from government R&D organizations, coming from various policymakers, election commissions, administrations, press, and other kind of industry people. We have had a very fruitful discussion. Now I looked at the program, and the program says a panel discussion. I really liked it. Why? Because I am not really given any bound. We can actually discuss anything on the earth. But I thought I should still actually focus on R voting. So I thought I will actually give a small title to this R voting panel discussion saying R voting the way forward, which basically means we already know that we are going for R voting. And if we are going to go for R voting, because I think you and I actually have no control over this. We better accept it that technology is actually moving in that direction where we will have no option but to actually go for remote internet-based voting. I mean, it's a question of today versus tomorrow, or tomorrow versus day after tomorrow. So there is a way we actually have to move forward. So I thought I will actually talk about, have this panel on R voting, the way forward. And what I'll do is, this is about 45 minutes, 45 minutes? Yeah, 45-minute panel discussion. I thought we will have something close to about 5 minutes per panelist on this subject topic, that is R voting, the way forward. We'll ask all our fellow panelists to put in their views, and then after we expect to be very interactive. Audience can actually come and ask questions, very embarrassing questions and very pleasing questions, all kind of questions. Okay, give us support and also brickbats. Everything is what we are actually going to welcome. So I would start with first Professor Purvi Bora to actually talk about the topic, and we will have exactly 4 minutes per panelist. Maybe it's a little bit overflow to 5 minutes.
Okay, so let's see, the way forward, R voting, we have to use the internet. Is that the topic?
Yes.
We have to use the internet.
We have no other option.
We have to use the internet. Okay, so what I would say is, I just want to, for 1 minute out of my 4 minutes, I just want to say, as everyone has been saying, including the election commissioners and everybody else here, so India has a very respected election commission, worldwide as well as within India. And it is trusted because it respects the voters, and you see all kinds of information on their website about how, for example, they will take the EVM to that one voter who is a ranger in a forest. And the EVM goes to that one voter to enable that voter to vote. So that voter doesn't have to go around and find a polling station. So this is the reputation that the Election Commission has. Now additionally, we see that the Election Commission has modernized. So they started off with paper ballots, and then they went ahead and they said, we want it to be electronic, let us move with the times, let us be able to scale, let us do things more conveniently. And so they went for the EVM. Now the EVM, without the ability to audit, was challenged in court, and the case went all the way to the Supreme Court, if I remember correctly. And there was a voter verifiable paper audit trail required by the court. And so now we have an EVM which is auditable. And this is the stable point we have reached. So we have progressed from paper ballots to an electronic means of recording votes and a convenient means of recording votes, which has really helped poll workers to actually take things to those kinds of voters who are in those remote forests. And now we reach this other point where we say, there seems to be more technology out there, let us be a developed country, high technology, let us do the next thing. So this is where we are. And so this is where we are kind of in the election scenario, given our history and given where we are. Now next, let me just briefly, in another minute, recount the history of what we know about voting. So as I said, I've spent 12 years studying electronic voting. All my work has been constructive. That is, I do not have a single paper that describes attacking a voting system. My interests are in constructive voting systems. I've contributed to a lot of such projects. There are a number of papers that describe new voting systems attributed to me or to my PhD students or to both of us. We have deployed such a voting system in a municipal election near Washington, D.C., Tacoma Park. So what I say should be understood from that perspective. I'm not a scaremonger. I'm not somebody who goes around scaring people saying, oh, this world is going to come to an end. I have contributed to constructive voting systems. This has been my entire contribution over the last 12 years. And I'm saying that don't go for a completely internet solution. On the other hand, if you want to go for a supervised solution using the internet, so now you go to the next level. Currently you have EVMs that are not networked. So now progress to a higher technology version. You have the ability to use the network, use the internet to make things convenient, to include electoral rolls, for example, so that voters can vote from anywhere, so that remote voters can vote, so that voters from army service voters can vote, so that migrant voters can vote. So first of all, use this to diversify your electoral rolls and to bring them on the internet or to somehow network access them. So that is the first thing, and that's the first thing you're going to have to somehow figure out how to do. The second thing is go for voting in identify places where you can have supervised voting for your voters and have them vote there. Fine, have those machines on the internet. And but make sure that when you do that, because now the internet has crept in, so recognize that this is less secure than the EVM, even though it's more convenient. And in order to make up for that, in order to keep the respect that the Election Commission has and the EVM plus paper audit trail has, make sure that you can audit that internet vote. Make sure that you can do that, and one way of doing that, and the gold standard today, because we are looking at a higher tech solution, because we are a country that can go for the most and the best in technology, let's go after what is recognized as a gold standard, that is end-to-end verifiable electronic voting. And do that in a supervised setting. And the reason for the supervised setting is not because the computer that you're voting from is in your control and will have all the antivirus. That's not the reason. The reason is many things, because you can actually know if there's a denial of service, you know that voter is there, they cannot vote. And so you can make some other alternate arrangements for their vote. Additionally, you can do authentication. You can actually have that person use a fingerprint reader there in that thing, and you can access maybe the Aadhaar database live if you want. I mean, I don't know how that would be legally, whether you need the electoral rolls or whether you can use the Aadhaar database there. So this is really what you want. And in that context, you can also have your paper trail. And you can have the Supreme Court satisfied with the VVPAT over there. You're using the network to, say, transmit the votes from London or New York or Assam or wherever. The coming year, they're going to be counted quickly, and you still have the audit and the respect that the voting system currently has among the people of India and outside. So this is something you want to consider. There's something else I would want to suggest, maybe it's further term, but you might want to think about putting a chip in the EVM that makes it end-to-end verifiable. Now, here's what that will give you. So right now, what the EVM has is, you're very quite sure about its code unless the chip is replaced. And you have that audit trail, supposing that chip is replaced. But that code is very clean if it's that code. It's much better than a general purpose operating system from that one perspective. So you could, if you added this other chip, then that code too, you would be able to have considerable control to try to prevent sort of problems from happening. And then the E2EV would take care of issues if they came up. So that's my, thank you.
Thank you. I will now request Mr. Greg Burton.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Moona. I'd just like to give my support to what Professor Vora has said. And the example I gave yesterday was of a system that we've used in Australia which collected remote supervised votes from London over the common internet. So plain Jane common internet, and it was a verifiable system. It's completely free. Any of you in this room could get it today, right now, download it. It would need to be modified, but it could be used inside your EBM machines. It could be used. If you modified it, it would provide these qualities that Professor Vora has mentioned. I just wanted to say two things that I missed out saying yesterday. The first one is that it's my humble advice that the Electoral Commission of India and CDAC make prudent use of technology. You've seen so many different technologies promoted here on the stage today, and for certain, some of them are very good. Secure DNS is very good because it prevents websites from pretending to be official websites. That's good right across the electoral board, right across the election spectrum for electoral information. Trying to enforce authentication with IP addresses, I think is not a good idea, for example. So I would hope you make prudent choices. And yesterday I said I spent 10 years making an e-voting system, and at the end we kept adding more and more security to this system. In fact, we were going backwards at the end, and we built a huge fortress. And yet the bad guys only needed to find one thing wrong and they got in. What you really want is a house, a really simple house. That's all you want. But with the quality that you just can't get into this house without setting off the alarm. Okay? And the alarm is a very special alarm. You just can't get into the house. This is what end-to-end verifiable voting is. And the reason that the house is more secure than the fortress is because the attacker can't get into the house no matter what he thinks of. He can't get in without being detected. So he says to himself, there's just nothing I can come up with that's going to let me get into that house without being picked up. It's not true of the fortress. You just have to try hard enough and you'll get into the fortress. Okay, so prudent use of technology, keep everything nice and simple. Now what Professor Vora has said is that we want people to turn up and vote. Perhaps EBMs can be taken to forest ranges, but I appreciate that telling electors that they need to go somewhere and do something instead of using their phones to access Facebook or whatever is not an easy sell. But let me say to you this, there's always going to be some interaction with the government or government agencies that's going to be in person. For example, while I'm in Disney World, I can't do my practical driver license exam, okay? I can't. And I can't download an app on my phone or my PC that simulates driving and then prints me out a driver license, okay? It'll never happen. And the reason I know it will never happen is that pilots must do thousands of hours in a real plane before they get their license. They do hundreds of hours in a simulator, and commercial aircraft simulator is fantastic. Okay, it's just like a plane. But not 1 minute of time in the aircraft simulator counts for flying hours. Not 1 minute. So, flying a plane, driving a car, and I'm going to say voting, are in-person activities because they are high integrity activities with awful consequences if something goes wrong. Okay, that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Mr. Burton. I would now request Vivek Sharma from Dimension Data to actually give his viewpoint.
Good evening. I am no expert on our voting per se. I sell technology solutions, and I've been doing that for the last 25 years, and I've seen the industry change in a major way. For example, in banking in India, we just jumped to Windows-based ATMs. We never had the mainframe era. our net banking solutions, comparatively, if you say, are in the same way. So internet has changed a lot of things, and with the advent of smartphones and the explosion that we've had on mobility and mobile phones in India, lives have changed overall. However, as some of the esteemed panelists have pointed out, voting is not something that we do every day, correct? It's for Lok Sabha elections once in 5 years, same thing applies to our legislative elections and things like that. So this needs to be done probably in a controlled environment to start with, because in India, the scale of things that has to be done is finally humongous, correct? It's because of the size, diversity, population that we have, correct? So this has to be done in a modular phase-wise ways. If we have to leverage internet, for example, for voting, one idea could be to start with armed forces, where you have the end point controlled, correct, on how you want to come, and authentication may be easier because you have a very targeted audience of what you're doing, correct, and you learn from that. Because no matter what a technical consultant tells you, you're still going to learn the pitfalls as you implement and go ahead. So there's no big bang approach to it anyway, correct? And technology will change very fast, applications will change very fast. So the solutions primarily from a perspective of deployment on the infrastructure and all, as earlier speakers also pointed out, could be based on models where we really don't need to create something humongous to start with, and we build it up as we grow primarily, and it'll also be because how would political parties take to it from a perspective of audit? We've seen reactions to political parties in the past to technology which initiatives that earlier governments have taken, correct? So it's not only about law of the land, how politicians react to it. So my suggestion would be to start it in a small way, maybe on a pilot, in a control group, which still votes remotely, and then learn from that and build upon it. Thank you.
Thank you, Vivek. I would now request Dr. Darwari to put his viewpoint.
Our voting or I-voting, I think 2 days intervention which we had was very, very positive, starting from Election Commission to all of us who are sitting here have presented the technological part and the policy part. And as I said in the morning, there are 3 P's and a T which is coming up in the whole governance of our vote. So people, process, policy, and the technology. These are the 4 major things which have been discussed, and all of these are very, very relevant. Because first, the people mindset, because people's belief, that's what exactly has been discussed, and discussed a lot. Because if they don't believe onto the system, then any system can be very well failed at all levels. So that's what exactly the first level of confidence, which is to be built in the people. If the processes are not correct, as Puri Voraj was telling, if the processes, if they are not correct, then there is again a problem, and we have to see how those processes can be seen and can be worked out threadbare, and try to see that a flawless system is to be built. That's again a requirement of this whole system, that this whole thing has to be foolproof. The third point is the policy, and when we are going to define the policy, as the first speaker today, Mr. Pavan Duggal said, that the legal framework on which we have to work, that again is a very, very important feature, because the authenticity and the authentication, both the things are very, very important. Authentication, we are trying to bring in through the Aadhaar. That's, again, we have deliberated. So like in eSign, we are trying to do that, the digital locker which is there. So some of the models which are presented can also be the way forward, because in Digital India, we are anyways getting connected. We are having NOFN or this BharatNet, which is going to be connected. And due course of time, because this is again a phase-wise stuff which we are proposing. So like initially, we are thinking of defense personnel, the election commission, the people who are moving, or NRIs, or especially abled people. So this can be a very good ground to test our technology and then take it to the next level. And the third is the technology, and technology part we have discussed a lot, and some of the challenges which we are looking into can also be overcome by, like, even a concept which was coming up is that a QR code can be defined and that can be taken up to the next level. And those things are the new experiments we can do and then try to see that. So I think since ECI is very positive and we are all looking forward for our vote, and that will definitely change the future of voting. So I think we definitely would like to work on it and try to see all positives and take it forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dalwari. I would now request Shri Shuklaji to actually put his viewpoint.
Thank you, sir. And quickly, I have only 3 points to say. While we have discussed and everybody knows what are the technical challenges that we need to face, we talked of different threats, and I commented that let the best be not the enemy of good kind of thing. All are true. Fundamentally, Election Commission is dealing with right now a point which Professor Purvi has indicated, that it should be a supervised voting. Right now it is only supervised voting happening in India. Unsupervised voting is not happening, and there are no laws. For supervised voting, how should it be governed? There are laws in place, there are instructions in place, model codes are coming in picture, everything. Right now we are also dealing with another issue of handling this paid news through media. 48 hours before this canvassing is to close, and canvassing is happening on WhatsApp, on Facebook, on how to deal with. There is no law supporting that or even controlling that. This kind of situation we are facing. So unsupervised voting, if at all we plan to go ahead, we first need to have an environment in place. And the moment we say internet voting or remote voting, and for overseas electors as well, we also need to think whether we are going to impose model code conduct outside India somewhere in some nation. I can't really expect that polling booth or some controlled environment is created in a nation where there is no democracy, and then we are conducting elections out there. And I mean, this External Affairs Ministry, they have raised these concerns already, and they have raised hands saying that no, our embassy cannot help you. So we are in such a situation, and therefore to take a decision whether it should be a controlled voting, controlled environment or uncontrolled environment in which we should go for internet voting is not only a technical matter, but it is some other matter also. So we need to look at that particular part. That was my first point. Second point, as I described in my session, that it is a need which is defining the requirement which is being posed, and that is coming first from overseas electors only. The second level of voters, those who are demanding this service or this particular utility from Election Commission, is service electors. General voters are not demanding. There is no requirement. People are not saying. Students sometimes say that we are staying here. Sometimes some workers in Mumbai from Bihar, he says that kindly give me that. But what scene we observe usually is election and voting day is kind of a celebration for us, and people go back to their place to vote and enjoy. So general voter community is not demanding that kind of thing. So we have some time to think on that. We are not in a hurry to implement for general voter, and where we can bring in such type of a big number of votes and then we boggle down onto a number and try to find out appropriate technology. Right now, the immediate goal that we have is to identify a solution which can satisfy overseas electors as well as our service electors, that too forces, armed forces only. Not election officials, because election officials, what we call them as EDC, election duty certificate holders, we call them as, they are following postal ballots so systematically that almost 100% postal ballots are returning from officers, those who are on election duty. So I would like to suggest that this class be not considered right now because system is going on smooth. Only armed forces, those who are placed across the border or on the top of the hills or deep down in sea somewhere, they are not in a position to vote and they usually demand. So these are two groups what are calling us, what are putting a request to us to find a solution. So what we need to do is we need to plan immediate action, immediate development of technology, immediate development of, I should say, system which is end-to-end verifiable, not technology only, system itself, and that we should think of putting it in place earliest possible and then watch that system how it grows. That particular lesson learned will definitely help us in finding out a suitable way to handle masses, general voter kind of. That was my second point. And third point, Election Commission has already gone ahead. Election Commission has submitted, rather put up papers for modification in RP Act and correlation with the Information Technology Act, and that is being tabled in Parliament. And as I was telling Professor Muna Saab, that a committee has already been constituted, group of ministers committee, and they are working on that. So any minute, any day, earliest possible, we may hear that, oh, law is there now. And the moment law is there, all pressure will come on to us technologists to put a system in place, because then we won't have a return path. So with that kind of situation, we need to really first find out our short-term goal, which is more important, rather than finding a long-term goal. For long-term goal, of course, we can have discussions, we can think, we can deliberate, we can find points, minor points, because a minor point in India, a small percentage of population, it itself is a big number in reality. So looking at that point, we can find smaller points very easily later. But our first requirement is that, let me not forget that. Thank you.
Thank you, Shuklaji. I would now request Shri Jordi Pugalli to actually put up his points.
Okay, I think that it's also important to understand exactly why the internet voting usually is tried to introduce it in different elections, and the main motivation is that there are remote voters that want to vote, and the current postal system is not properly working. So it's not only a motivation about, okay, we have new technology, so we want to be a smart citizen and want to vote. So I think that we don't need to lose this debate, since there is currently also an issue that we need to solve. And of course, one of the solutions is internet voting. But we have been debating here about introducing internet voting or remote voting. Of course, has security risks. We have seen them during these days. It's important to see them, not hiding them, since the best way for solving risk is to know that they are there. And we have been also debating different ways of the requirements that we need for deploying a secure remote system. I agree that end-to-end verifiability should be a must. Maybe we can have several debates about, and I think that sometimes these debates are done more from the technical point of view about if this system or not is achieving the objective of the security assumptions that we make are robust or not. This is maybe a debate that we can do maybe from the technical point of view of experts in this case. But I think that is important that we are not stopping this. There are multiple ways for approaching this problem. One is, for instance, in different phases. It's possible to start trying to solve some of the issues of postal voting, introducing maybe some technology as a postal, and then moving forward and maybe finally have internet voting. It's not necessary to solve it now. It's also important maybe to start with the real community that have these problems, maybe the Indian voters living abroad. And another thing that has been discussed here is internet voting or supervised places outside. I have been also in pilots that this has been considered as one of the solutions, but and these pilots usually stop after one time has been used. The main reason is because if you are in a country, for instance, like Argentina, how many embassies in Argentina has India? So if you are saying to remote voters, okay, you can vote, but you need to go to, you only can go to the embassy that is in the middle of Argentina, so you need to take maybe a flight, then you are not solving this problem. So I think that at the end, internet voting should be considered. Not only voting using supervised, maybe it could be also a solution, since I think that different channels is also a solution for giving different options for voters. But I think that is also important, that at the end, the final objective is also help voters and to cast their votes. And I think that supervised, in providing remote supervised polling station can solve, but I don't think that is not solving exactly the problem for all the people that is living well, outside India, and specifically when you are living in a country that maybe you only have one embassy. So I think that more or less is there. I think that there, well, from my point of view, I can defend, I think that our technology can help. Maybe we have our debate now with the academics, so. But I think that we cannot stop this. We need to go, since at the end, the same requirements that usually are demand to electronic voting on internet voting, if we try to test them with the current, for instance, with the current postal system, we can see that it's not also achieving these requirements. So the problem is still there. So I think that we need to find a solution. From my point of view, I think that internet is one future solution. Of course, it's not something that needs to be maybe applied suddenly now for everybody. So it can be started with different phases, and then and that way, then if there is something that needs to be maybe improved, then you are still on time for doing this.
Thank you, and thank you to all speakers for keeping up, with the time limits. I thought I'll just talk for a few minutes, less than 5 minutes, to actually give the mammoothness of our polling system. We have 850 million voters, okay? And on an average, all election commissions, people sitting here would actually know, Election Commission of India actually holds parliamentary elections and the assembly elections. And then there are these state bodies which actually hold at least 2 such elections, which means every 5 years, on an average, we are looking at 4 times the turnover of people, right? Which basically comes to, if we actually look at something like close to about 3,500 million or 3.5 billion people every 5 years. And if I just do this arithmetic, it basically comes to, if I just do a statistical analysis, it comes to something close to about 20 lakh people voting every day. Now that's the kind of challenge that we have on our hand. Of course, in the past we have actually solved this in various different ways, right from paper ballot, and many of us are witness to that, to EVM. And whenever there is a change of technology, whenever there is a movement from one to a different phase, I think there are always these doubts that come in our mind. Are we doing the right thing? Because there is a system which is by and large functional, by and large working, and then we move to another system which is by and large unknown. It may have a lot of features, but it is unknown. This is the thing that we actually saw it in early 90s when we moved from paper ballot to EVM. Today, if you actually tell anybody that we want to move from EVM to paper ballot, I think people will start shouting at us. Okay, people will start looking at, are we doing the right thing? Because the right thing today, in the current context, is the EVM, not the paper ballot. What paper ballot providing the security? Of course, in any democracy, there are number of different things that we have to look at. Is this a secure solution? Is this a workable solution? Is it a solution at all? And I think if you look at these three different answers, then answers actually become very clear, right from 1952 when first election was held to today. I think there is no doubt that we have evolved a lot from a system which was fairly insecure, and as Professor Shahani yesterday talked about some of those things, to today when we actually have lot much more bigger faith. I think evolution is a key. You know, we actually learn from our mistakes, we learn from our experiences. We always, it's a tendency of human nature that we actually move and start correcting things for ourselves. But it doesn't mean that we always are looking for an absolute solution. In fact, to start with, all our people, you know, who have been experts in security would agree with me that there is no such thing called absolute security. By definition, absolute security doesn't exist because absolute security is an unstable process, right? I mean, if we actually mathematically we look at, if we really want to go into an absolute security, right, it is an unstable process. It's an unstable process that such a thing cannot exist, which means it is always an evolutionary process. There is always an issue of what is the threat level perceived and is my solution catering to that threat. Tomorrow, when a new threat comes up, of course, we have to evolve and look for those solutions. Those solutions could be process solutions, those solutions could be technology solutions, those solutions could be, you know, just saying, yeah, I mean, this doesn't happen, just ignore the solution, right? Ignore the problem. So there are all kind of things. Now, when we are looking at various things, you know, one thing in the cyber security space is very clear. The cyber security is a game between police and syndicate, right? It is always a one-upmanship kind of a game. Find out who is a better winner, and we always hope that police is a winner, okay? But there will be once in a while you will actually find that syndicate is a winner, but then the system should be in such a way that we are able to handle whenever we identify at a large scale such kind of thing. When one or two votes here and there, it doesn't anyway change the entire thing, right? But in a large scale, when malpractice has happened, we must have a mechanism to correct it. And that is the way our democracy has survived for that long. We have never been looking at absolute correctness. We have been looking at large scale correctness, by and large of fairness. And that is, I think, the way it has actually happened. Now, today when people are looking for internet-based voting, I think there are cases where we don't have a solution but go for internet-based voting. There are cases, I mean, like for example, if we want to hold election of NRI diaspora in United States, that's another democracy. They understand the democratic values, and to actually hold an election for India in US is a lot much easier than, for example, looking at a similar kind of diaspora in UAE. UAE, where holding an election is illegal, right? Now, in a country where holding an election is illegal, you go and say, here is my country which wants to hold election in your country. I think these are going to be, you know, real diplomatic challenges. So there is pragmatic thing one has to look at. There are things which one has to look at from the viewpoint of what is possible, what is not possible. In India, we move from paper to EVM, or voting has always been a supervised voting. Supervised voting actually brings in certain values, and these values are, for example, is there a coercion? Are people being threatened to vote? You know, we can actually, if it's a supervised voting, we know this is happening or not happening. In fact, the supervised voting even went another level, and people, you know, the Election Commission today even video records the election to say that these are not happening. So, in the time to come, the processes keep evolving. It is not that, you know, our videography started right from 1952. It started only later. You know, when we actually became wiser, we learned what are the mistakes that are happening, what are the problems, and then, you know, administrative solutions are always there. I think today we are actually sitting at a crossroad where we have no solution but to start involving internet voting in a small scale in some way, maybe in a controlled group, so that we don't create obvious mistakes, we don't get into the pitfalls of saying, are we doing the right thing? No, you did not do the right thing because you knew about this. For example, end-to-end verifiability is a known thing. It's a known thing that you need to have end-to-end verifiability. The question is, where do you stop? Because whatever be the solution, there will always be a case where we can find a corner case where this will actually fail. Right? Because there is no absolute security. So therefore, there is always a notion of where do we stop and what is acceptance level of verifiability. It could be because of technology, it could be because of process, it could be because of other methods, but there has to be a free, fair election, as transparent as possible, and that is the important, because there is a notion of verifiability versus, paid elections. I mean, you give me an authentic receipt from the election commission saying that you voted for my party, I will give you 1,000 rupees, right? So is that the solution that we want to actually lead into? One has to actually look at various aspects in various different, in a wholesome manner. I think with this, we would like to open the stage for audience, and as you actually say a question, you please, state your name, organization, and the question. And if you actually have an answer that you would be seeking from a specific panelist, please also name the panelist. So our volunteers will help you, but please come forward. Yeah.
Respected all, my name is Shastri. I'm from Bhopal State Election Commission. I have few questions over here. Yes, the session is being named as Way Forward. I would like to understand, instead of using the way forward, can we know, or your thought, what is your thought for the next step forward? How would you like to take it next step? What would you do next step? And how would you structure? Would it be a structured workshop or a conference like this, or what? And what would be the topic for the next session? And when it would be? Plus, the next question is, how big is this problem? The remote voting, is that a problem, or is that nice to have, or are we addressing what number of people or what number of voters within India or outside India? How critical is this? We would like to know. Plus, and a negative side of this, what are the chances that we may not move forward at all? As one of the panelists, Mr. Shukla, I believe, mentioned, it's tabled in the parliament. What it turned out to be a negative answer from them. So these are the three questions. So,
Who would like to take this?
He's asking for next step forward, and so I'm not in a position to organize workshops. I'm not in a position to organize workshops here, so I won't answer that.
Yeah, okay.
I think all the questions what you asked, they are very relevant. I appreciate that. I would like to take third question first. When I say that it has been tabled in the parliament, this is not exactly what I said. I said it's a group of ministers committee framed up. They are looking at the proposal. Once they go through and once they approve, it will be legislative law ministry which will put up the proposal to parliament. It may take its course of time. They may turn it down or they may accept it, which we don't know. But if they turn down, then nothing, I have to do nothing. But if they accept it, then I have to do something. So that's something I'm planning from right now. That is what I want to say. Second question, what you asked is also very relevant. Election Commission always looks at inclusivity of all electors, their participation. When we register somebody as an elector, we want him to be a voter as well. We don't want him or her to stay as elector. So elector and voter, the difference is practically nil for us. We want every elector to be a voter. And even if a small community is excluded for environmental parameters, then it is a question for us to take care of that. Overseas electors, our service electors, they are the people, they are the group which are finding it difficult to follow existing norms and vote. And that's why we need to find a solution for them. Now it is a technical committee to tell us whether it is the internet voting that we should go, or we should find some different process to find out for that particular solution. Yeah, would we want to say something? But before that, the first question, it is a very broad question you asked. When you say that this workshop is over, what next? Are you expecting another workshop? What is that you are expecting? Question is that. Hold on. I understand what you are trying to say, but let me tell you, our step forward, what we have in mind is, let us find a solution for overseas voter, then go for service voter, then go for deprived voters. Deprived voter in the sense those who are physically different or differently abled people, as we say, or old age people, those who can't walk. We feel it very hard when we say that, oh, we have created ramp in our polling station. But then why should we create a ramp? We should be a ramp to go to them there itself. That is one other. And lastly, the general voter. That is the roadmap that we are looking at. And on implementation side, we are definitely going into slow but steady increasing dimension manner. We want to take up a smaller area, that is maybe a single constituency, experiment it, find out the result, put up to the technical committee if there are any observations, go for next with improvement, and repeat this cycle, increasing the area. I remember some participant in the workshop saying that proof of concept is not 100 voter, 200 voter, 800 voter. Let me answer, it is but a proof of concept. We want to increase that number to next proof of concept. We want to increase that number further for third level of proof of concept. So proof of concept is defined with respect to some particular observation that we want to coin on. Technology being tested, proof of concept. Volume is being tested, next proof of concept. Security is being tested, kind of thing. So that particular plan we are having. Then in that event, we have tabled to committee our roadmap. We want to go ahead with one-way postal ballot, get the ballot from website, print it, and post it by normal channel. That is one way. Second step, we want to go for postal ballot, e-postal ballot being sent and received back through electronic media only. Third will be internet voting, and fourth will be mobile voting. So these are 4 stages we are looking at. Technical committee is evaluating our suggestion, and they will be coming out of it. Purvi, I think you wanted to say something.
So I think that the e-postal ballot is a reasonable solution, and my impression from yesterday's conversation was that the Chief Election Commissioner said something like it had already been recommended or something like that. So I think that that is reasonable, and that limits how much the internet can interfere with the vote. The other thing is I was a little confused because I thought that you said that that the poll workers, the election volunteers who work on the polls or paid workers, you're getting 100% of their votes back, is what you just said. And then now postal ballots. And then now you're saying it's very difficult for them to vote. So I'm a little confused about, so it's for the armed forces, So, I think that you could use an e-postal ballot, and that would be reasonable to do if you really have to use. So it looks to me like there's this thing that we have to use the internet. That's the first requirement. And somehow that is a requirement that the 10 million voters who are in the diaspora are asking the Indian government, that this is what they want, and so we have to do it because maybe they're a noisy bunch, maybe they are a happy bunch, whatever it is, that there's some pressure coming from them. There's 10 million of them. Meanwhile, there's 300 million migrant workers in India. There are service workers for whom you can actually have supervised voting because all voting in India is supervised. Then there are older parents, like my parents are old. My mother would prefer a paper ballot if she was going to vote from home. She would not be instinctively using the internet. Maybe she would have her grandchildren use the internet. So they would be voting for her, not herself. This is what I heard from somebody today. I won't give away who it was. But so it's not, so I don't understand actually why the internet is so important, or is there a voting system you have already chosen and now you want to say the internet is important, the diaspora is asking us, or are you actually looking at all the requirements out there, the 10 million diaspora, the 300 million migrant workers, the however many differently abled people, the older voters? I mean, are you looking at all their requirements? Will the internet voting satisfy the need of older voters who need to be carried to the workplace? And older rural voters, will the internet voting satisfy that? Will it help them? So that's...
I think that's a very, very relevant point that Professor Purvi Vora has made. But I will answer, one part by a question. Okay. So your question was, is remote voting a problem? And if it is a problem, then, or does remote voting have a problem? And if it has a problem, then how real is this problem? So in other words, how can we actually move forward? Let me answer this question in a slightly different way by asking you a question. And the question is very simple. If you look at the population today, the usage of internet is so common. It has exploded in last 3, 4, 5 years. And if you actually go by that, are we saying that the parliament will not pass, will actually say that there is a yes or no kind of a thing? Yes, internet voting or no internet voting? The answer is no. It will probably be yes, internet voting. I'm being more practical in this. It will probably be yes, internet voting, or modify your approach so that we can go for internet voting. The solution today is not going to be no internet voting. And I think we must be very realistic on that. Now the second part, I think we need to understand when we're saying internet voting, what do we mean by internet voting? Internet voting does not mean that it is unsupervised voting or supervised voting. For example, a supervision by camera could be an example. An authentication by online devices could be an example. There can be a number of ways. But using internet as a communication media is a different thing than using internet for voting and using internet as a solution. I think there are two separate things. The point is, can we actually make a choice at this point in time? Probably today, yes. Tomorrow we will actually have no scope of even that choice. And there has always been a time when we actually looked at and adopted a technology. There was always a question. We went into banking. We said, are you going to do this internet banking? Is this the right thing? We actually went from paper to even ICT-based banking, ICT-based banking to internet-based banking, internet-based banking to mobile-based banking, and every time we have been asked this question, are we doing the right thing? Maybe it is all plagued with all kind of security issues. But then the practical thing is, maybe once in a while there is a malpractice that is happening. But then there is somebody who is taking the responsibility to underwrite that. Similarly here, there may be 1 or 2 cases of malpractice. The question is it happening in a widespread manner? Right? Democracy is not about everybody's vote counts. But the democracy is not about one vote. Democracy is about majority. And I think it is important to understand and realize that fact. Okay? Because that fact is so important, because on that basis our democracy has lived for so many years right after 1952 election. And that is, I think, an important thing. So, I don't think today we have a solution to say no internet based banking. It might be a delay. It might be 1 year delay. It might be 5 year delay. It may be 7 years delay. But believe me, I don't think we have a solution today to say no internet based banking.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Surya Krishnamurthy. I'm right now working with the State Election Commission, Maharashtra. For the last 21 years in my service in the government of Maharashtra, I've conducted elections right from village panchayat to parliament. So, I believe I bring in a perspective from the administration side. What we have heard over the past 2 days is basically a technology-oriented discussion. There has been no economic analysis, there has been no social analysis, there has been no political analysis. When things go to Parliament, actually what happens is the political analysis takes place there. I would have liked the organizers to invite somebody who could give throw light on these three perspectives also. That is one observation that I am making. Who should be, or what way should we go forward? That is for Parliament to decide. And obviously, once Parliament decides, Election Commission of India has only very little wriggle room. They frame the guidelines according to which we have to work. But if there is going to be a next conference, we would appreciate if all the returning officers of Parliament and Assembly are brought to one platform so that they can discuss the modalities by which it's going to be enforced. Because ultimately, the returning officer is responsible for conduct of election. So if the returning officer is here and his inputs are there, then probably the end product that we are going to devise, the whatever mechanism that we are going to use would be a better option. And you can have his input online or whichever you want, but let those people also come in because they are also district collectors, they are also experienced officers, and they also have a perspective in the way forward because they are going to be the future election commissioners of India 25 years down the line. Thank you.
I think it's a wonderful point that you have said and very good input that you have given, a very different perspective, and I think we should actually take this into account whenever we look at the new gathering next time. Thank you very much.
Good evening all. Sir, I have no question. I just want to make some 1 or 2 points. Just to mention about
Can you speak out your name?
I am Shivaraman from NIC. Just to react to Professor Vora madam, that VVPAT is verifiable accountability for this paper audit trial. Ma'am, maybe tomorrow there may be a technology, a specialized link may come, in which a pre-printed stationery of a particular symbol, and at the end of the day, whatever that visible by the voter, it get vanished and the pre-printed ink may prevail. So, as mentioned by our Professor Sahani in the first session, the bird continues. So, whatever the reason, the bird continues. Just to aggregate, just to sum up in a generalized form, the man and the machine involved in the election. The thoroughly tested machine on its own won't make any mistake. Who is making the mistake is the man, either willfully or accidentally. For accidental involvement, our election commission sir, Mr. Shukla, he is having a lot of experience, he will share. In the very beginning of the EVM, one presiding officer, he even shown the result. Even cleared that particular green seal and even shown the result at the end of the day. So it was pardoned by the commission, kind of because he is accidentally had that, no intention in that. Again, for the willfulness, the very recently concluded RK election, sir will be knowing much more. One particular booth, there is 105% voting. Is the EVM make mistake? We all accepted EVM, that it's a tested one, no doubt. It's the person who is involved, he is allowed to vote such 5% extra. Of course, no doubt, commission is taking appropriate step in that particular direction. So again, coming back to you, sir, Professor Mona sir, we no need to panic. The existing laws and things will take enough care to bring the person in under the ambit of law. And my submission to the international fraternity is that please find some forum, international forum, to bring those actors into laws, into the books, so that we no need to worry much on it. Otherwise, we keep on defending ourselves, security, and the hackers is allowed to free. We are not at all bringing him in books. So there should be some international forum which has to identify and has to bring them into books. That will control a greater extent of this. And my final submission to our Shukla sir is that, sir, there is a larger set of people in our country is very well with the commission, believes the commission, keeps the commission side, this thing. However, for some small pressure group, that is VVPAT and things like that, it brings a lot of complexity in the electionary people who are involved. And sir, you are very well aware, over this period, election after the election are getting complex and complex. So any innovation, things like that, it should simplify the existing process. It should not add more complex to that. So we have to keep certain objectives and we can very well go ahead. And only thing we have to identify people who are making mistakes and they are bringing to proper roads or act. Definitely we can very well go ahead with internet voting or mobile voting or in future any type of voting also. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to?
is regarding, you said about international forums for these things. So yesterday I mentioned a report that was released, released about 10 days ago, that is called The Future of Voting. And it basically, the team, there were 30